Yesterday, I went in depth into this poem, which is called The Modern Syntax, Dr. Spooner in Search of the Delectable, which is in this 1873 book, Partentonian Patchwork, ostensibly by Benjamin Penhallow Shillaber. And I looked at all the interconnecting clues and what I call a tapestry of Mathew's life and work, which are connected with this. I won't repeat all of that. This morning, I did read the entire poem, and I did a little bit of internet research. So first of all, there was a Dr. Spooner, a real-life Dr. Spooner, William Archibald Spooner in England, and he was known for making kind of malapropisms along the line of Yogi Berra, but he was too late for this to be a reference to him. He basically didn't get a reputation until 1885, which was 2 years after Mathew died. So he hadn't even gotten his doctorate at the time that this was published. He got his doctorate in 1903. See, so this can't be the same person. That's just a coincidence. Secondly, there is one clue. There's a mention of Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution in this poem. Since The Origin of the Species was published in 1859, of course, it didn't get established right away, so that puts the authorship of this poem at least in the 1860s, if it wasn't written specifically for this 1873 book, which I rather suspect it was. So it's not an early work by Mathew. Let's see. There's no, what I would call a smoking gun that would convince skeptics that this is definitely Mathew Franklin Whittier's work and not Benjamin Penhallow Shillaber's poem. But most of the examples regarding this character, Dr. Spooner, as he goes through life in search of the delectable, are plausibly linked with Mathew's own personal biography, his autobiography, his own life. So I would say that he drew pretty heavily from his own experience for this, not entirely. He was definitely involved in politics, for example, but he never became a politician per se. He certainly studied books. He never became directly involved in academia, to my knowledge. So some of these things are imaginative, but a lot of them draw on Mathew's own personal experience. What I'm going to do is read this entire poem. We're going to have it on tape for posterity, however grandiose that may sound of me. In 2021, poetry has somewhat fallen out of favor. Epic poems have certainly fallen out of favor. In 2021, no one would, in their right mind, would sit through a reading of an entire lengthy poem, but I'm going to read it anyway. I think this is exceptionally good, and its depth was not suspected, really, of Benjamin Penhallow Shillaber, as long as people thought he was the author, because he's known for the relatively superficial Mrs. Partington. Mathew was a deep student of the ancient Greek Stoic philosophers. That's basically what you're going to see when we get to the end of this. Abby taught him. It was part of Abby's tutoring originally. She was just a girl of 10 or 11 or something, or even younger when she started tutoring him. She was from an upper class background. She had a classical tutored French education. Her father was a marquis. She was brilliant. She was a child prodigy. Mathew desperately wanted to go to college, but was not permitted to go. He ran away from home, and Abby stepped in and became his college and gave him a liberal education, passing on whatever she had learned in tutoring. That's what I gather. So all of this is, and the humor is absolutely consistent with Mathew. Now, I read before, and I'll read it again, this little footnote where he says, at the end, he says the quarterlies might snap at his seeming and only fault of coining words, as a pickerel might at a frog's leg. That's Mathew. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think Benjamin Penhallow Shillaber would make allusions like that. Mathew made them all the time, was absolutely typical of Mathew's humor. And to me, personally, having studied Mathew's work, if there's any red flag that says this is Mathew Franklin Whittier and not Shillaber, it would be that particular little allusion, little reference. Now, I have my windows open. It's hot. I don't have my AC running yet here in Maine, but it's getting a little warmish, so all the windows are open. You'll hear things, cars going by and stuff like that. Hopefully the fellow with the leaf blower or whatever it was won't start up again. And I have here a bottle of water instead of my usual fancy glass from Goodwill. And if you wonder how such a poor guy ended up with such a nice looking glass, it came from, I think it was Goodwill and not Salvation Army. All right, I'm going to get started. I'm going to read straight on through this. It's a very difficult read. I'm going to stumble a number of times. When I stumble, I have learned to just like snap like that so that in my audio I have a little peak, and I will try to hold more or less the same position, and then I'll start again. And then in editing, we'll just have a soft dissolve. So you'll probably see quite a few soft dissolves, and that's what's happening. I've just misspoken. By the way, sometimes I don't catch things when I'm reading, and later on when I watch the video, I catch things. So for example, yesterday I forgot to mention, I've seen this before, but I forgot to mention in the piece about the Piscatorian Brotherhood that I shared yesterday, that was written for the New Orleans Daily Delta when Mathew was deep undercover as an abolitionist, making connections with the Underground Railroad in the South. I forgot to mention that the title is a huge clue in itself. The Piscatorian Brotherhood, those are fishers of men. And then when they talk about the free and easy, well, free means freeing slaves. So there's two clues right there. Apparently the clues were too broad and the wrong people figured it out. All right, I'm going to start. The modern syntax, Dr. Spooner in search of the delectable. On Monday morning, with the sun uprist, good Dr. Spooner ate his steak in haste and hurried down his coffee and his twist, as though no moment he would idly waste, then took his cane within his sturdy fist, with animation on his features traced, and started forth in attitude reflectable, to seek, mid-air's mundane, the goal delectable. Asterisk from reflectable reads, the author at the outset, before he has led the good doctor through any of the labyrinthine walks of life, with the independence of the poet, who will not be limited by the conventionalities of dictionaries, grammars, or common sense, claims the right to coin as many words as his opinion or the needs of rhyme may require. Remember, this is the author of Ethan Spike. Yeah. Hence the words, quote, reflectable, and the claim is introduced to discern the critics of the Atlantic, North American, or foreign quarterly, who might snap at this seeming and only fault, as a pickerel might at a frog's leg. Before him lay the undeveloped scene that fate, impatient, waited him to show. He stood a moment with a thoughtful mien, as if uncertain which path he should go, then held his cane, his fingertips between, that by its falling he his course might know. Northeast, 'tis well. Now all my doubts at rest, since chance so wills it, I'll go south-southwest. Not he alone to go adverse to fate. Some do, with all prognostics pointing clear, and full success attending at the gate. They do not stop propitious hints to hear, but clutch at phantom shapes that tempting wait, till, to their disappointment and their fear, they see their error and neglected track, with little hope of ever getting back. All have desire to win the happy goal, and all strike out o'er some elusive gravel, investing hope and earnestness of soul the mystery of the future to unravel, finding too oft, to their dismay and dole, their road like Jordan very hard to travel, their delectation like Paddy's flea, within their grasp and yet not quite to be. Diversity of tastes prompts diverse aims, and as the whim controls, men blindly go it, pursuing here and there their little games, through which, for bliss set out, they think they'll show it. Each plays his part, with equal hopes and claims, trusting that fate propitious will bestow it, but very few attain the culmination that gives the sought-for boon of delectation. Though, for that matter, comes the question up, what is the boon for which they are thus striving? Fill to the brim joy's most enchanting cup, some would reject it, other draughts contriving. being more happy far to take a sup from somber springs, or in the depths be diving, a strange anomaly we too often see, where happiness is sought in misery. No sympathy have I with such as these, but what they do is what they deem the best. The genial soul, the heart in fullest ease, comes up the nearest my ideal of blessed. We will not quarrel, each his pathway sees, and travels it for happiness in quest. Each to his taste, as the old lady said, what time she kissed the tenant of the shed. So Dr. Spooner, with his heart aglow, stood ready to attain the boon I speak of. The fates had fixed the path that he must go by his cane's falling, you recall the freak of. He rested as he felt the breezes blow from a fair hill of which he saw the peak of, and thus addressed them, like a necromancer demanding of unsentient things an answer. Tell me, ye winged winds, as on ye fly, hast come from scenes where delectation waits? Point me, O winds, that sport beneath the sky, where perfect joy the craving spirit sates. Direct my steps, that I may quickly hie where bliss unfolds its amaranthine gates. The winds deigned no reply, but swifter sped, tearing the doctor's hat from off his head. There is no more provoking thing I know than this, to have one's hat torn from his pate. No sympathy doth any one bestow, and grins the awkward accident await. The curious crowd look on to see us go, as we pursue the fleeing thing of hate, until perhaps some chap, a little faster, plants his thick number 12s on our new castor. He stood a moment, when regained his tile, and on the incident reflecting dwelt. He paid the fact the tribute of a smile, a feeling tribute, for the hat was felt. I've chased this hat the fraction of a mile, he said, and this sage thought comes through my pelt, that, as I've won it, racing with the wind, in the long run I happiness shall find. And, thus assured, he sped with eager feet, caroming here and there as on he flew, pushing some off the sidewalk to the street, and by collision bringing others to, exciting talk we will not now repeat, and angry thoughts awaking not a few, when to a full stop was he quickly brought, like a blue bottle in a fly-trap caught. There moved along, exactly in his way, one of those well-made-up artistic women, who are, as one might very justly say, 1/4 flesh and blood, and 3/4 trimmin'. He tried to pass her, giving ample play to all the furbelows about her streamin', when, spite of all his wary care and pain, he found his boots entangled in her train. He turned about and gazed on what he'd done, confounded at the seeming mischief dire. But when he saw the spitefulness that shone forth from her eyes, like that same baleful fire we read about, excuse he proffered none, but said, if I am sorry I'm a liar, what right had she at just that time to spread above the spot whereon I chose to tread? But in a moment more he felt contrite, and held his head down with emotion humble. He o'er the pave had no exclusive right, and mongst her things come afterwards to stumble. He had endangered an annoying plight, at which she might well frown on him or grumble. And then he turned, repentant, but, a goner, he saw the lady turn a distant corner. And this impressed itself upon his mind. No one is happy disregarding others, as men are so untwistingly combined that rending one the great remainder bothers. And but as one is just, polite, and kind, and all his selfish aspirations smothers, can he expect that happiness below which the exalted soul alone can know? He moved along mid scenes of active life, and stoutly strove his object to attain. There was excitement in the pressing strife, but with it all there mixed a sense of pain. With selfishness society was rife, and finding all his expectation vain, heart-sick and weary, with unlevel head, he turned himself towards home and went to bed. And then the dreams born of his urgent wish led through fair scenes that waking ne'er reveals, feasting on spreads of flesh and fowl and fish, quaffing rare drinks of most attractive seals, all right side up his favor beckoning dish, holding such cards as kindest fortune deals, waking at morn with resolution stout, his quest for happiness to carry out. Now there's some little teensy asterisks here. There might be a portion of this poem that's been omitted. One day is like another in the race for some pet object, every else forgot. So the good doctor daily held his chase to find 'mong mundane scenes the blissful lot, the one strong hope to rest his weary pace when he should reach the delectating spot. Of all the spots that I know worth the trying, a 50 spot is the most satisfying. Thus, as with zeal elate he wandered out, his mind intent on seeking delectation, and with an eager eye he looked about, giving all things a wise examination, unheeding an admonitory shout that of some danger made ejaculation. There came a snowslide from some upper height, and Dr. Spooner disappeared from sight. A mingled feel waits accidents like these, a grateful thrill like an unuttered prayer, as one from perils saved his status sees, and then a pressing tendency to swear, which from oppressive wrath the temper frees. So some folks think, in which I take no share, but the good doctor, as he moved once more, took stock in neither mood, nor prayed, nor swore. In fact, just then in search for happiness, and doubtful if 'twere pious or profane, he would not compromise his chance for bliss, but non-committal would a while remain. Many another does the same as this, desirous some pet object to attain, for policy and selfishness prevail, while interest steers and caution trims the sail. The greatest pleasure that the world can give is that we draw from intellectual sources. Freed from the sensuous dross in which we live, we mid the pure ethers vent our forces, and misspent hours we happily retrieve in following those crystal water courses that flow from founts and mental mountains springing, and to our feet the choicest gifts are bringing. So Dr. Spooner thought he'd take to books, and bought them lavishly, all subjects choosing, having them placed in their adapted nooks, with catalogues their resting place disclosing, bound handsomely in calf, that graceful looks might add attraction and enhance the using. All books that might a reader's thoughts awaken, from Blood and Thunder nibs to Friar Bacon. His heart ached at the woe of thrilling stories, fraught with depictions of unreal life. He read in histories the crowning glories that flowed from fields of sanguinary strife. Philosophy and physics passed before his eyes, with the light of ripe reflection rife. Yet betwixt Reed and Bacon, he confessed he'd neither read, but thought Reed was the best. I don't know if that's pronounced Reed or Read, R-E-A-D-E. Then borrowers came and fastened on his board, splitting his sets remorselessly to pieces, and in those cases where they were restored, they came back dog-eared and defiled with creases. Until, at last, beyond endurance bored, said he, "From now henceforth all this ceases," then locked his door upon his precious shelves, and left his authors pondering on themselves. The tempter whispered, "Go it while you're young. Taste the delirious tumult of the hour. The siren sings as sweet as ere she sung. The senses plead with unabated power. Bring your dull-souled joys halcyon scenes among, and pluck, while yet it blooms, life's brightest flower. Don't mure yourself till felt year's chilling blasts, and quaff the cup of pleasure while it lasts." In dissipation did the doctor dip, and strove to find what fun there might be in it. He pressed the sparkling goblet to his lip, till his old head hummed like an ancient spinet. He joined in pleasure's jolly partnership, in wild adventure mixing every minute. But when he found his nose all raw and red, "There's very little fun in sport like this," he said. A wholesome lesson this, that all may learn who try such roads to find the bliss they crave. They're lit by lamps that oil plutonic burn, and lead through scenes that weaken and enslave. Brigands of passion lurk at every turn to trip the feet of those their prowess brave, and the, quote, "good times that lured the soul away are drafts on time with no funds left to pay. Many of those these sprightly lines who read know how it is themselves, no slang intended, though fair the promise all too pronely heed, with honeyed hope and expectation blended. The hope soon prematurely goes to seed, and winter comes before the summer's ended. The roses turn to ashes neath the tread, and dirges wail the season that has fled. Were I disposed a moral to indite, here most unquestionably is its place. Don't wait repentance until appetite no more has power its progress to retrace. Complete worn-outness surely's not the plight to give repentance much, if any, grace. 'Twas no great merit in old Uncle Ned corn cakes to eschew with his teeth all shed. He walked and pondered with his brow erect, devising in his mind which way to turn to gain the point his fancy did affect. Convinced indeed that he had much to learn before he saw the beacon lights reflect, that on the coast of pure enjoyment burn, when, lost in reverie, his reason fled, he found himself down cellar on his head. A cellar doorway, though a fearful trap, affords a cautionary moral clear to every visionary, dreamy chap, impelled by contemplation high or beer, to heed his steps, lest they should chance, mayhap, to lead him witless into trouble drear. Although 'tis well uplifted gaze to show, we should have half an eye for things below. And the good doctor lay a moment thus, not knowing how or why he should be there, the world all muddled in a precious muss, concerning which he didn't know or care. And then he rose and said, "Ridiculous!" running his fingers through his matted hair, in which confused and much mixed up condition he felt just fit to be a politician. In politics the doctor took a stand, and blurted with an unremitting zeal, retailing dogmas up and down the land, professing earnestly the public weal, condemning all who, on the other hand, chanced differently regarding them to feel, and was a cogwheel active as could be in the great whirl of party and ginnery. As legislator in the town and state, across the stage with giant steps he strode. His was the dictum on which hung the fate of mighty hobbies that the lobby rode. He took no bribes his act to compensate, and voted as, quote, greatest good was showed, rich only in the sense of duty done, and certain gifts his self-denial won. Strange fancy his who seeks in politics for happiness, as well might he essay to honey find in husks, or oil in bricks, or new potatoes in New England May. His chiefest recompense the meed of kicks constituents ungrateful always pay, and find he's purchased, when it is too late, a tiny whistle at a monstrous rate. Such delectation must be found in fame, as Solomon had said 'twas more than riches, and so his sail he spread to catch a name, courting each breeze to draw and test its stitches. His name appeared with eulogy aflame, and all the slabber that the vain bewitches. Besides, his face graced each pictorial journal, with praise or blame allied, alike infernal. He talked his mouth for fame in every place, was always found wherever wished or not. From a street corner speech to saying grace, he rose to the occasion piping hot. Sometimes a slap he'd welcome in the face, and a nose-pulling now and then he got. But all such favors helped his little game to win the, quote, glittering height on which was fame. His head grew dizzy on his lofty perch, his reputation mere factitious show. And, like a weather vane upon a church, he turned just as the fickle wind might blow, till counter breezes gave a sudden lurch, and down he came 'mong common folks below, the ridicule of every humble eye, the golden cynosure but guilt brought nigh. For fame he'd sacrificed all thoughts of peace, had found antagonism everywhere, had lied and swore his chances to increase, had tried philanthropy and wore long hair. For every wheel he had the needed grease, in every public movement had a share, denied himself all comfort for a name. And this, said he, is all there is of fame. In wit's display he next great effort made. and searched the dictionary through for puns. While such extreme abandon he displayed, his jokes popped off as though they had been guns. Grave people all around him were afraid, and 'gainst his influence bewared their sons, bidding them think their sires never acted thus, and calling him disreputable cuss, tummer, which softened some the verbal force, like the old clergyman of whom they tell, who, vainly trying to secure his horse, by his momentum in the brambles fell, and, angered thereat, made the matter worse by shouting out vehemently, "Oh, hell!" But seeing in an instant his offense, "Alleluia," added, which quite changed the sense. Now, this is a little smoking gun because Mathew wrote a very similar story. I think it was back for, I don't know if it was for the New England Galaxy back in like 1828 or if it was a little bit later in the New York Constellation, but he did write a story very much along those lines, for what it's worth. The doctor made a laugh where'er he went. He had no scruple thus to serve them so. Even a funeral scene could not prevent, and where an undertaker had to go, his mates such unction to the season lent. He said, "What esprit de corps," as in corpse, "these folks do show." 'Twas villainous, but those the rue that quaffed looked through their sables and at Spooner laughed. Now this, of course, is autobiographical because Mathew did that. Matter of fact, he did a diary of a punster, I think, at one point. The lecture bureaus then must have him out, and curious people came from far and near, with buttons sewed on more than extra stout, fearing to burst them with the fun they'd hear. He heard on one side the injudicious shout, but something like a groan filled t'other ear. Snowed in and criticized, self-reproved and weary, he felt, as did admiring friends, 'twas dreary. I don't think Mathew ever went the lecture circuit, or if he did, he didn't do it very long. His imitators got rich off it, but he didn't. And next in fashion's walks the doctor pressed, and clothed himself in most approved attire, with brainless glorying at being dressed up to the standard that the modes require, from hat to boots resplendent as the best, with but to shine the limit of desire, and every one inferred who chose to scan that Dr. Spooner was a killing man. But then the thought upon his senses stole, what am I but an ape, though not so mean as mine as Darwin says was man's first role before the footlights of this earthly scene, the copy but of others, with a soul that grasps infinitude, too grand, I ween, to spend its faculties in such base use as hatchling goslings from a tailor's goose. Tailor's goose is a piece of equipment that tailors used, I believe. This, then, is evident, he further mused, that delectation does not come to those who spend their strength in attributes abused, or ripen into gorgeousness of clothes, neither to those with qualities unused, who dawdle, to days dying, in a doze, but unto those who try, by work or wit, the world's great family to benefit. In gentle recreation did he strive, attending all the small feats that were growing, was great at fairs where ladies so contrived to keep the cream of human kindness flowing, tried summer picnics with their glee alive, that such a wealth of promises were showing, joined social clubs and literary coteries, and took a stand high up among pleasure's votaries. Thin dissipations such as these, at best, gave little recompense to his ambition. He seaward turned, and on the ocean's breast he thought he saw his ardent hopes' fruition. He sang sea songs and heave-hoed with the rest, but found the sea unsteady in position. He didn't relish his first evening supper, and closed his heave-hoes in the leeward scupper. He murmured faintly, "Please set me on shore. I love the grand and ever restless ocean, but I believe that I can love it more on terra firma, where, unfelt its motion, I can delight to hear its mighty roar, and throw myself with rapturous devotion. But here, alas, the power that rules the sea, rules it too crookedly by far for me." Then Dr. Spooner ventured into trade, and learned to buy and sell with ready art. He many paying operations made, and got the trick of traffic all by heart. This is autobiographical for Mathew from his younger years and somewhat later. I'll start that again. Then Dr. Spooner ventured into trade and learned to buy and sell with ready art. He many paying operations made and got the trick of traffic all by heart. So shrewd was he in action he displayed, he won the fame of being devilish smart, which means, well, anything respectable, but found the trade was far from the delectable. It would have done you good to hear him lie, or froze your blood, just as you felt inclined. He'd swear that black was white, a trade to tie, and all so plausible that caution, blind, took stock at once, without a how or why. Such marvelous integrity to find. And then he slapped his pockets, well content that he had made a mighty big %. Now, if you read The Perils of Pearl Street, which was written by Mathew Franklin Whittier, not by his editor, Asa Green, you will find that he talks about being too honest to do pressure sales. So he was very much aware of this aspect of being a merchant. Mercantile shrewdness, though it fleece and skin, is ne'er dishonest by the rules of trade, and those who deepest plunge and largest win sleep lightest on the bargains they have made. Conscience to such makes no unpleasant din, and at the future not one whit dismayed, they will their wealth with most complacent air, and lay them down the just's reward to share. To education then the doctor flew, the very field for happiness, he thought. The total that he guessed and what he knew were into active requisition brought. He went to all conventions with a gout that was a substitute for what he sought, and, being quite a favorite in the city, they made him member of the school committee. Then pleasure turned to business. Early, late, his doorbell rang with clamorous appeal. Permits to grant, parental doubts to bait, teachers to hear, vexatious feuds to heal, new books to choose, the salaries to rate, the pangs of interrupted peace to feel, the public growling in its discontent, and watching, lynx-eyed, each invested cent. With not a chance to steal, and snubbed and bored, his privacy invaded as a right, his motives doubted and his claim ignored, his life a constant ignominious fight, the slave of schoolbook agencies that poured their arguments so thick that, vanquished quite, he vowed no more his soul with such to vex, then handed in his thin official checks. The doctor next dipped fiercely into morals, went regularly every morn to prayer, mixed earnestly in theological quarrels, where men for truth's sake pull each other's hair, had for all ill the formulaic aborals, 2 words, I think, you'll not find anywhere, struck for hair-splitting dogmas left and right, and deemed that he was fighting the good fight. He drew his skirts aside when others passed of different belief from that he held. He fanned dissension with persistent blast, and with a Pharisaic rapture swelled. He'd gained perfection in belief at last, and from his lofty perch all else beheld in darkness lost, salvation's chances slim, but he was safe, and what were they to him? Small delectation could he find herein, and worry of contention grayed his hair. He'd searched in every other one for sin, and looked within to find it rampant there. He'd thought through self-perfection bliss to win, but saw its fallacy in half despair, and then backed out, not finding what he'd fain, placing his baggage on some other train. He'd be a mason. Surely he could find within those ancient halls the thing he sought. It seemed delightful to his ardent mind that happiness, like onions, could be bought. And so he acted as he felt inclined, and soon was to the ancient gridiron brought, seeking for blissfulness one seldom sees, as lawyers get to heaven by degrees. He spread himself on mystic pins and seals, and knew more signs than doth the zodiac, was letter perfect in the springs and wheels of night trains running the mysterious track, took every step the order's scope reveals, until, from the ineffable looking back, he wept like what's-his-name, who lived of yore, because he couldn't master something more. Then Dr. Spooner took to rural shades, and dressed himself in most unique attire, a costume something like the knave of spades, as odd as Piscator could e'er desire. And then he followed brooks through grassy glades to catch the trouts that epicures admire, but ne'er could he by any subtle crook induce the fry to bite his baitless hook. He sought dim nooks by water's babbling streams. He breathed the sweet balm of 1,000 flowers. He laid him on the emerald sward for dreams. He hid himself within the wood's deep bowers. He reveled in the morning's opening beams. He sweltered through the sultry evening hours. Poisoned by dogwood, bit by bugs and flies, he fled from happiness 'neath rural skies. And then despairingly he made complaint, "Oh, who can tell me where is happiness? With much endeavor I am worn and faint, and each step seems to show the progress less in striving for that boon which hope did paint, which seems more distant as my steps I press. Tell me, ye wise ones, in earth's mighty bound, where, tell me where may happiness be found?" "Here stay your steps, my boy," a veteran spoke. "I'm just the chap'll point you to the spot. I've sought for happiness through fire and smoke, my briarwood pipe, and here is where I've got. The search for happiness is but a joke, for which you needn't go all round the lot. I'll ease your caput of its great quandary. For delectation, see the dictionary." Then laughed aloud that execrable hind, while Dr. Spooner turned in strong disgust. But as he thought of it, he felt inclined to think the rough man's ribaldry was just. For to himself he said, "I nowhere find the delectation of my hope and trust but in the book, and therefore I will wait, and let things happen as it pleases fate." And then he took things as they came about, nor strove from fate his happiness to wring. At unpropitious luck he made no rout, but was serene as when joy's birds did sing. And in contentedness of purpose stout, he found himself as happy as a king. Feeling true delectation did not rest on anything outside the seeker's breast. And there's a note underneath. He says, "Note, the author read the foregoing to a young and charming critic who had just completed the ecstatic story of The Bloody Hand, or The Avenger of Darville, and she immediately suggested that if Dr. Spooner had found some amiable being worthy of his choice, as in the instance of which she had just read, he would undoubtedly have found the happiness he sought. It seemed to her that he had thrown away a great deal of valuable time." Now, this last, it should be obvious, the irony in this last statement, but there's a depth to it as well. Mathew had that kind of happiness with Abby, and he lost her. So the bitterness of her suggesting such a thing, not knowing that he had actually had that once. See, and also Mathew wrote quite a number of parodies of sensational literature. And the irony of this young lady saying that she had the answer to the whole question in one of these awful sensational novels. I don't know how else to explain that, but it's the crowning touch that Mathew Franklin Whittier would have put on this philosophical poem. There you have it. I don't know how long this is. I'm betting it's pretty close to an hour, but I can't read my computer from here. I don't really have any commentary on it, except that Mathew was getting older. If this was written, say, in 1870, say it was 73 or 72, let's make it. So he was born in 1812. So he would have been, 60 years old at this time. He's looking back over a lifetime of failures. And there is a little piece signed with Matthew's star about Utopia. And I'm going to have to stop this and look up where it is and read it to you. I think it might be kind of interesting for you to see his star-signed piece in connection with this poem. So I think I'm just going to stop this and find that particular piece and then launch this again. All right, I have the 1856 Portland Transcript here. And this is one of the first star-signed pieces that I ever found. It might be, I don't know when I found it. I could look it up, I think, because I have these discoveries all dated. But I'm talking 8, 9 years ago. I don't know. It appears in the May 3rd, 1856 edition of the Portland Transcript. It sits directly next to a letter from Ethan Spike. Ethan Spike is Matthew's one historically known character, and this was one of the first instances that I ever recorded of Mathew putting his work side by side on the page. This was when I was just learning that Mathew was also the star. And I didn't know that it went back like to 1830. At this point, I didn't even know it went back to the 1840s. So here I am in 1856. But this is called Utopia. And I'm going to go ahead and read all of this, and you can compare it with the poem I just read. So this is Mathew in 1856. The other one very likely could have been written around 1872 or maybe the late 1860s. Utopia. The age is a thirst for knowledge. It is one of search, exploration, and discovery. Cold and stormy indeed must be that sea, stern and sunless that shore, which repels its curious intrusion. Into the deep and dark earth, beneath and upward, beyond the sun, pierces its restless and inquiring gaze. Neither in the material world alone lie the objects of its search and inquiry, but the dark and impalpable realms of abstract thought are explored with tireless zeal, and men have not yet ceased to search and seek after that for which they have always sought. Some state or condition in which the evils they now experience shall be unknown, or at least softened and abated, and some at least have never grown quite weary of painting to themselves in the glowing tints of fancy the beauties of this better lot. The ancients deemed it was once enjoyed in the old primeval days of Saturn, when, not far off from Janiculum, he built his citadel and first taught the Italians agriculture, and that even in later ages the blessed boon was still held upon earth. Beyond the Riphean mountains and the north wind, said they, beyond the barriers of the Arctic ice and snow, repose in unending summer the sweet fields and valleys of the Hyperborean land. In this sunny region, free from every harsh and hurtful blast, live a race most happy. They know not labor or care, but dwell in woods and groves, free from all discord and sorrow. The blind old bard, too, dreamed of rest and nepenthe for human sorrow in the far and wonderful isle of the Lotophagi, where all was forever calm and still, and the strange fruit of the lotus forever swung and ripened in the drowsy air, whereof he who ate forgot his native land, and wished not for the day of return, but desired to remain forever eating the honeyed lotus. And the old geographers were not without their vague legends of sunny seas and happy isles westward, far out beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where lay the sweet Elysian fields and hung the golden fruit of the Hesperides. In subsequent years, the golden age, the good time, the better lot of man has never been forgotten, although it has sometimes been modified to suit the tastes and wishes of those who have sought it. The old Spaniards thought they had gained a view of it in the bright but fabulous realms of El Dorado, the shining one, and not a few of our sober ancestors seemed to see it afar off in some utopian isle of the South Seas, or favored colony of the Western world, in Bacon's Nova Atlantis, or Campanella's City of the Sun. Some in our own time are looking for the long-sought good in a reconstruction of social systems, albeit the paths they pursue seem to my poor perceptions far too misty and overhung with fogs, ever to conduct them whither they would go. And many maintain in good faith that neither upon the Hyperborean fields, nor Hesperian shore, or sunny South Sea Isle has ever yet dawned the golden day, but that it is yet to be. And to this last opinion my judgment inclines, and my heart sends in that direction its hopes and wishes. Many, in truth, are the air-built exploring expeditions, many the pretty argosies which I have sent out thitherward, which never came home with their ventures, or brought me word again, and so I must needs leave the golden age where I found it, or rather where I did not find it, merely saying, however, lest we should never quite reach it, that the wiser and the better we grow, the nearer we shall come to it. Signed with a star.